Hello everyone. I just wanted to go over the one thing that was mentioned on this last chart on the last video. Marion Diamond found that those 5 factors were responsible for keeping the brain healthy and active for a lifetime. And again, those were optimal diet, exercise, newness and challenge, strong immune system, and finally, love and nurturing. The love and nurturing one came about as a result of her experiments with the rats. You saw some of this in one of her videos there, where she had 3 cages. She wanted to know whether love and nurturing made any difference, and whether when you enrich the environment of the cage, it will make any difference for rats. At that time, the scientists believed that you were born with a brain and it developed according to genetic principles, and that was it. You couldn't do anything to really change it much. It was all genetic, and she believed that environment played a huge role in that, but she had to prove it. So she set up an experiment where she had 3 cages. The first cage she had was a very simple cage with 1 rat and no toys. Those of you who saw the video that she did know what this is all about. Those of you who couldn't get into that video for some reason, I'm just going to explain roughly what went on there. So the first cage, no toys, no friends, just a single rat, a very boring life, an impoverished environment. The second cage, a couple of friends and a couple of toys, and a more interesting rat environment, and a more natural rat environment in some ways. And the third condition she had was a cage that was really large with lots of really interesting toys, kind of like a Disneyland for rats. It was kind of fun to be in, and lots of interesting, stimulating things, and friends. So a much more enriched environment than the impoverished environment or the medium-sized environment. She would let these rats live for 600 days, which is the average rat lifespan that she was getting out of them, and then she would check out to see whether or not they were intelligent by measuring the thickness of their neocortices. And what she found was those rats who were in the single cage with no friends, no toys, had a very thin neocortex, dumb as a sack of hammers. The poor rats were impoverished in their environment, and they didn't wind up very smart. The medium-sized cage, much thicker neocortex, and they were average rats. They were reasonably intelligent, and a reasonably thick neocortex. The third condition were those rats in the enriched environment, where you had lots of toys, lots of friends. They had very thick neocortices. They were gifted rats. And so she concluded that intelligence has a lot to do with your environment, and that it can be influenced by your environment, which was a revolutionary discovery back then. One of the things that happened was that she was confused at one point because she was replicating this experiment at different times, and one of the times that she was doing this, she noticed that some of the rats in the single cage were as smart as the rats in the medium-sized cage, and she couldn't figure out what was going wrong there. Something was wrong, but she didn't know what. So she went down and she watched the lab attendant who was looking after these rats in the single cages, and what she found was what she was doing was changing the protocol. Normally what would happen is they were all trained to clean the cages by taking the rat from the single cage by the scruff of by the tail, putting him into a cardboard box, and then cleaning out the cage, and then grabbing the rat by the tail, put it back into the cage, and close the door. Everyone was cleaning the cages that way except this one lab attendant who was raising all these smart rats. What she would do is put her hand down into the cage. The rat would crawl up her sleeve, across the back of her neck, down into the cardboard box, while she was talking to it. Then she would clean out the cage. She'd put her hand back into the cardboard box. The rat would climb up her sleeve, across the back of her neck, down into the cage, and she'd continue to pet it and talk to it for a minute, and then she'd close the cage. Just that 2 minutes of kindness a day appeared to be making the rats a lot more intelligent. And so she was over in Germany. One of the German scientists, when she was telling him about her experiments, one of the German scientists said, "Dr. Diamond, you say your rats are old, but your rats are really not that old. Your rats are 600 days old. Our German rats live to be 800 days old." Mary couldn't figure out why they were living so long, because she was lucky to get them to last 600 days in the environments that she had. So she watched the Germans and how they did it, how they were doing their experiments. And one of the things she saw was, again, the Germans were handling the rats where the people at Berkeley were not. They were just grabbing them by the tail, putting them into the box and so on. But in Germany, they were handling them and talking to them, petting them and things like that. And so she thought, I wonder if TLC is a big factor here in determining whether or not rats are smart. So she designed an experiment where she would put these rats into the cage, and then she or her lab attendant would pick them up, pet the rat, and talk to it for 1 minute a day. And when she did that, she found that those rats were a lot smarter than rats that did not have that kind of attention. So her conclusion was that love and belonging makes a huge difference for the intelligence of these rats and for human beings. When people are in nursing homes and there's nobody comes to see them and there's nothing to do, it can be deadly for people, and they die very young compared to those who have more stimulation and lots of friends and lots of activities that are going on. So one of the things they have found with retirement is that if people retire and do nothing, they wind up getting very few pension checks. If they are able to keep busy in their retirement and have all kinds of activities and interesting, stimulating things going on and lots of friends, they wind up collecting a lot of pension checks and being very happy and living fulfilled lives. So enrichment makes a huge difference, and that goes for all people of all ages. It's particularly important in your field that you help people to be stimulated and interested and feel like they belong. So love and belonging becomes a really important factor in all of this. Thanks.